Welcome back to Plutarch's Life of Numa and Lycurgus compared. So we went over in a previous video Lycurgus and Numa, the lawgivers of Sparta and Rome, the kings rather. And an important point about Lycurgus' kingship that we'll get to in a little bit. Plutarch wrote a little piece about a few pages long, very interesting comparing the two. So let's get into it. First of all, both moderate, they're both temperate, they're both just. That's what they wanted. They wanted to create a more just state. But the situations that each inherited were very different. Lycurgus inherited Sparta, and at that time they were trading in gold and silver. The state was very luxurious, and the people were soft. And he had to build them up to warlike character. Okay, now we have Rome. It was under the rule of the first king, King Romulus, for about 37 years. And the people were fierce and warlike. And what Numa had to do was tone them down a little bit, make them more pious, make them more just, make them more religious. So who had the tougher job? Lycurgus in Sparta, who had to build from the ground up these people who were soft, and he had to make them into warlike characters, or the people who were already warlike, and Numa had to tone them down a little bit. Obviously, Lycurgus had a tougher job. It's easier to fall than it is to climb up. Now, that being said, there's an important virtue that we see in Lycurgus in particular. It's very interesting. Numa was not that enthusiastic to become a king, but eventually he acquiesced and he accepted the role. Lycurgus, on the other hand, could have been king, but instead, if you recall the video, the first major reform he did was create the Senate, 28 members, they had to be 60 years plus, and 2 kings. So 28 senators and 2 kings, balance of power. That was a very big move that Lycurgus did. He could have been king. His virtue, his justice led him to not accept the kingship and create a different type of government rule. So Lycurgus gets a big win on that one. In terms of slavery, how the society treated their slaves, under Numa, there was a festival of Saturn, and slaves and their masters would sit side by side and eat together at the table. They were equals there. In Sparta is a different story. The Helots, the population who the Spartans enslaved, were treated despicably. That was the biggest weakness of the Spartan society, is the way they treated their slaves. So now let's get into education. In the society of Rome under Numa, it was a kingship, but it was like a democracy, very cosmopolitan, very, very mixed group, mixed multitude, with all types of arts and crafts and music and dancing and all these professions. And when parents came together and had a child, the parents could raise the child to be whatever the parents wanted the child to be. It was free. In Sparta, it was another story. Boy turned 7 years old, taken away from his mother, put into a communal setting with other men, and generally trained very rigorously until he becomes a warrior in his later years. Later years meaning late teen years and 20s. Okay. That was something that Lycurgus did. He systematically created a very strict, rigorous education system for the Spartan society, something that Numa did not do for the Romans. And what do we see here? At the end, when this picture is clear, when we have a clear view now, how do we determine who is great? We determine that by what the people do when the person is not around. Numa, when he died, after his reign for many years, I believe it was 43 years perhaps, around there. During that reign, there was no war. The gates of the Temple of Janus, which when they were opened signified war, closed signified peacetime, they were closed the whole time. No war. But the moment that he died, it was like the fiery tempers had been under lock and key for so long, and they just exploded. And Rome became full of war everywhere. That being said, they did conquer much and became a very big and great nation. When they abandoned the laws of Numa. Sparta, on the other hand, what happened when the Spartans abandoned the laws of Lycurgus? After 500 years. They kept his laws for 500 years. And then what happened? They brought in, remember, Lysander brought in gold and silver from a conquest, and they gradually started getting into luxuries again. Collapse of the society. They went from all the way, the number one at the top, and they went all the way down to the bottom. What does that say? They abandoned his laws, and they went all the way to the bottom. Rome abandoned the laws of Numa. They went all the way to the top. Something to think about. I'll see you in the next one. Take care.